The snow fell quietly over the deserted train platform as 28-year-old Emma Carter sat shivering on a cold metal bench. Her blue nurse uniform did little to protect her from the freezing wind that bit through her thin jacket. She had been waiting for more than 2 hours for a train that might never come, delayed indefinitely by the storm. After a grueling 16-hour shift at Metropolitan General Hospital, Emma was both physically and emotionally. She loved her job as a pediatric nurse, but the truth was, it barely covered her bills. And tonight, life had dealt her one more cruel blow. Her landlord had changed the locks on her apartment. 3 months of unpaid rent had finally caught up to her. Now, all she owned sat outside in boxers, probably buried under snow, as she hugged her purse for warmth, unsure where she'd sleep that night. The sound of footsteps broke through the quiet storm. She looked up to see a man in a tailored black coat walking toward her. Holding the hand of a little girl in a bright red coat and matching hat, the man looked to be in his mid-30s, confident, successful, but there was something gentle in his eyes. The little girl clutched a small teddy bear and watched Emma with open curiosity and kindness. "Excuse me," the man said softly. "I'm Alexander Winters, and this is my daughter, Sophie. We were waiting for our car when we noticed you've been here for quite some time. Are you all right?" Embarrassed, Emma forced a small smile. "I'm fine, just waiting for a train. But it seems the storm had other plans." Alexander studied her face for a moment, the exhaustion, the trembling hands, the forced composure. "Forgive me if I'm overstepping, but you look like someone who's had a very long day. Is there anything we can do to help?" Before Emma could answer, Sophie tugged on her father's coat and whispered something. He bent down, listening carefully, then looked back at Emma with a thoughtful expression. "Miss Carter," he said gently, "I know this might sound strange, but Sophie and I would be honored if you joined us for a warm meal. We'd like to talk with you about something that could help all of us." Emma hesitated. She was cautious by nature, but the child's hopeful eyes and the man's genuine warmth made it hard to refuse. "I wouldn't want to intrude on your evening," she murmured. "Please come," Sophie said softly. "Daddy says you look cold and sad. We don't like it when people are cold and sad." And that was how, 20 minutes later, Emma found herself in a cozy restaurant, wrapped in Alexander's coat and holding a cup of steaming soup. Sophie chatted away, telling stories about her favorite nurses at the hospital where she was once treated for asthma. Slowly, Emma began to relax. After a while, Alexander spoke again, his tone kind but serious. "You mentioned you're a nurse, and I couldn't help noticing you're facing a difficult time." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. "I lost my apartment tonight," she admitted quietly. "I've been working extra shifts to catch up on rent, but it wasn't enough. I don't have anywhere to go." Alexander and Sophie exchanged a knowing glance. "Emma," he said carefully, "what I'm about to suggest might sound unconventional, but hear me out." He explained that he was a single father, often away for business, and had struggled to find someone trustworthy to care for Sophie. "You need a place to live," he continued, "and I need someone kind, reliable, and compassionate for my daughter. What if we could help each other? You'd live in our guest suite, your own private space, and care for Sophie when I travel. In return, you'd have stability, a salary, and a home." Emma blinked in disbelief. "Mr. Winters, that's incredibly kind, but you barely know me. How can you trust a stranger with your child?" Alexander smiled. "Because I've been watching how you speak to Sophie, how gentle and patient you are, and your work as a pediatric nurse tells me all I need to know about your heart." Sophie reached out and took Emma's hand. "Miss Emma, I think you'd make our home happy." Tears filled Emma's eyes. She had no idea that this moment, born from her lowest night, would change everything. 6 months later, Emma stood in the Winters' kitchen, making breakfast while Sophie laughed in the garden. What began as an arrangement between strangers had become something much deeper. Emma had given their house warmth, laughter, and life, and Alexander had given her trust, respect, and something she hadn't felt in years: love. One morning, as Alexander adjusted his tie before leaving for work, he looked at her with a seriousness that made her heart skip. "This arrangement," he began, "has brought more happiness than I could have imagined. Emma, I've fallen in love with you not just for what you've done for Sophie, but for the joy you've brought into our lives." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Before she could speak, Sophie burst into the room, grinning. "Miss Emma, will you marry Daddy and be my real mommy?" Emma laughed through her tears, pulling them both into an embrace. "Yes," she whispered, "I'd be honored to be your family." A year later, in the garden where Emma and Sophie once planted flowers, they stood together as Alexander said his vows. "When I offered Emma a home," he said, smiling, "I thought I was solving a problem, but she turned out to be the piece our hearts were missing." Emma looked at her husband and daughter, her family, and realized that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings are disguised as moments of despair, because love doesn't always arrive in grand gestures. Sometimes it begins with a simple act of kindness on a snowy night.